Lena? His voice was soft, uncertain, as he stepped inside. What's wrong? She turned, the Polaroid trembling in her hand, and met his eyes. Who is she, Miles? His face drained of color, and in that moment, she knew. But before he could answer, the phone rang shrill, insistent, cutting through the silence like a blade. The phone's ring sliced through the tension in the dimly lit kitchen, each trill a hammer against Lena's nerves. Miles stood frozen in the doorway, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on the Polaroid trembling in her hand. The air between them crackled with unspoken words, heavy with the weight of betrayal. She didn't move to answer the call, neither did he. The ringing stopped, only to start again seconds later, relentless. Who is she? Lena repeated, her voice low but steady, cutting through the silence like a wire pulled taut. She held up the photo, the grainy image of him shirtless, laughing, tangled in sheets with that stranger's arm daring him to lie. Miles swallowed hard, dragging a hand through his hair. Lena, He took a step forward, then stopped as she flinched, her back pressing against the counter. It's not what you think. Then what is it? Her words snapped out, sharp and brittle. Because I've got a receipt from the Velvet Rose Motel, cash paid, room 12. And now this. She shook the photo, her voice rising. Tell me I'm wrong, Miles. Tell me I'm crazy. The phone rang a third time, insistent, a buzzing hornet in the room. Miles glanced at it, then back at her, his expression shifting panic, guilt, something darker. Just, let me explain, please. Before he could, the answering machine clicked on, the old tape whirring to life. A woman's voice spilled into the room, smooth and clipped, with an edge of urgency. Miles, it's me. I know you're there. Pick up. We've got a problem, someone's asking questions. Call me back, now. The machine beeped, and silence crashed back in. Lena's breath caught. The voice wasn't chorus stew polished, too cold. Someone else. Her mind spun, piecing fragments together. The motel, the photo, this call. How deep did this go? Who's me? Lena demanded, stepping toward him, the photo crumpling in her fist. Who's got a problem, Miles? He opened his mouth, but headlights flashed through the window again this time. Not his truck. A sleek black sedan rolled up the driveway, its engine purring before it cut off. Miles cursed under his breath, his eyes darting to the door. Lena, listen to me. You need to trust me right now. Go upstairs. Lock the door. What? She laughed, a harsh, incredulous sound. You don't get to tell me what to do. Not after this. Please, he hissed, grabbing her arm not rough, but desperate. I'll explain everything, I swear. Just not now. The car door slammed outside, and footsteps crunched on the gravel, deliberate and slow. Lena yanked her arm free, her heart pounding. She didn't know who was out there, but the fear in Miles's eyes told her it wasn't good. Against every instinct screaming to confront him, she turned and bolted up the creaky stairs, the Polaroid still clutched in her hand. She reached the bedroom, slammed the door, and twisted the lock, pressing her ear to the wood. Downstairs, the front door groaned open. A woman's voice, that voice from the machine cut through the house, cool and commanding. You're late, Miles, and sloppy. Who sent the picture? I don't know, he snapped, his tone sharp, unfamiliar. Lena found it in the mailbox. Someone's screwing with us. Lena's breath hitched. Us? She strained to hear more, catching fragments over the thud of her pulse. Can't afford this now, the woman said. Not when we're this close. Did you get it? Yeah, Miles replied quieter. It's in the shop, hidden. Good, then clean this up. She's a liability. Lena's blood ran cold. She? Her? She backed away from the door, her mind racing. What was hidden? What were they close to? Money? Something worse? The receipt, the photo, the callet wasn't just an affair. It was bigger, darker, and she'd stumbled into the middle of it. Footsteps thudded below, then the woman's voice again closer to the stairs. Handle her, Miles, or I will. The bedroom window rattled in the wind, the forest beyond cloaked in shadow. Lena glanced at it, then at the locked door. She had seconds to decide stay and demand answers, or run and figure it out herself. The floorboards creaked downstairs, and a shadow stretched across the hallway light. Then, a sharp ding from her pocket, her phone. Another text from that unknown number. Look under the floorboard by the bed. Her eyes darted to the loose plank she'd nagged Miles to fix for months. Heart-hammering, she dropped to her knees, pried it up with shaking fingers and froze. Nestled in the dust was a small metal box. Locked tight, its surface scratched and cold. The doorknob rattled. The doorknob twisted again, a slow, deliberate scrape of metal against metal, sending a jolt through Lena's chest. She clutched the small metal box, its edges biting into her palms, and held her breath. The shadow under the door shifted broad, unmistakable. Miles. Lena? His voice was soft, almost pleading, but it carried an edge she didn't recognize. Open the door. We need to talk. Her eyes flicked between the box and the window. The wind howled outside, rattling the glass, the dark expanse of Hollow Creek's forest stretching beyond like a void. Downstairs, the woman's heels clicked against the hardwood, pacing, waiting. Lena's mind raced whatever was in this box. It was tied to Miles's lies, to that photo, to the stranger now circling her home like a shark. She couldn't trust him. Not anymore. I know you're scared, Miles said, his knuckles rapping lightly on the door. I can explain everything. Just let me in. Explain? After months, maybe years of secrets? After that woman's cold threat echoed up the stairs? Lena's jaw tightened. She slid the box into her jacket pocket, its weight pressing against her ribs, and crept to the window. The latch was old, rusted, but it gave with a quiet groan. Cold air rushed in, sharp with pine and frost. The door thudded harder. Lena, please don't do anything stupid. She swung one leg over the sill, the roof of the porch sloping just below. Her boots scraped against the shingles as she eased out, the night swallowing her silhouette. The drop to the ground was 10 feet, maybe less she could make it. She had to. The door splintered behind her, Miles's shoulder slamming into it, and she didn't wait. She jumped. The impact jarred her knees, but she rolled into the grass, the damp earth soaking through her jeans. Headlights from the black sedan glared across the yard, and she ducked behind the woodpile, her breath fogging in quick, shallow bursts. The front door banged open, and Miles stumbled onto the porch, his silhouette stark against the house lights. Lena, he shouted, his voice raw, cracking. He scanned the yard, then cursed, running a hand over his face. The woman stepped out behind him, her figure sleek and poised, wrapped in a long coat. Up close, she was striking sharp cheekbones, dark hair pulled tight, eyes glinting like steel in the moonlight. She didn't yell. She didn't need to. She's gone, she said flatly, her tone clipped. Find her, Miles, before she opens that box. Lena's fingers tightened around the metal in her pocket. They knew about it. Whatever it held, it was leverage, maybe her only way out. She edged along the woodpile, the sedan's engine still warm, ticking in the silence. The keys glinted in the ignition through the window. A reckless idea sparked. She could take it, get to town, get help. But the woman turned, her gaze sweeping the yard, and Lena froze, heart pounding. She won't get far, Miles muttered, his voice tight. She doesn't know what's at stake. Then make sure she doesn't find out, the woman replied, her words ice cold. She pulled out a phone, dialed, and spoke low. We've got a loose end. Handle it. Lena didn't wait to hear more. She bolted for the car, yanking the door open and sliding inside. The leather smelled of cigarettes and expensive perfume, foreign to Hollow Creek's simplicity. Her hands shook as she turned the key. The engine roared to life, headlights flooding the yard. Miles spun toward her, eyes wide. Lena, no. He lunged forward, but she slammed the gas, tires spinning on gravel as the sedan fishtailed down the drive. The woman didn't move, just watched, her silhouette shrinking in the rearview mirror. The road twisted through the forest, dark and endless, the sedan's beams cutting through the mist. Lena's mind churned. Who was that woman? What was Miles hiding? And this box, why did it scare them? She fumbled it out of her pocket, steering one-handed, and shook it. Something rattled inside small, metallic, urgent. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. Don't open it yet. Meet me at the old mill. You're not safe. The old mill abandoned, rotting, a mile past town. She didn't know who was texting, but the words sank into her gut like lead. Not safe. The headlights behind her confirmed eater truck, closing fast, its engine a low growl. Miles. The mill's silhouette loomed ahead, skeletal against the night sky. its broken windows like hollow eyes. She swerved off the road, the sedan jolting over roots and mud, and killed the engine. The truck's lights swept closer, relentless. Clutching the box, she slipped out, the mill's shadow swallowing her as she ran toward its gaping doors. Inside, the air was thick with mildew and rust, the floor littered with shattered glass. Footsteps crunched outside Miles, or someone worse. Then, a whisper from the dark, sharp and close. "Lena." She spun, heart in her throat, and saw a figure step from the shadows. A man, lean and weathered, his face half lit by a flickering lantern. He held up a hand, his voice low. "I sent the photo. And the texts. We don't have much time." "Who are you?" she demanded, backing away, the box heavy in her grip. He smiled, grim and tired. "Someone who knows what Miles is really after. And what's in that box? It's worth millions and it's about to get us both killed." The truck's engine cut off outside, doors slamming. Footsteps echoed closer. The lantern's frail glow danced across the stranger's face, carving deep lines into his weathered skin. He was older than Lena had first thought, late 40s maybe, with grey streaking his stubbled jaw and eyes that held a haunted glint. His coat was frayed at the cuffs, his boots caked with mud, like he'd been running through the mountains for days. The air in the old mill hung heavy, thick with the stench of rot and the faint metallic tang of rusted machinery. Outside, the crunch of gravel grew louder. Miles and whoever else he'd brought, closing in. "Who are you?" Lena repeated, her voice a tight whisper, the metal box a cold anchor in her hands. "And why should I trust you?" The man's gaze flicked to the box, then back to her. "Name's Gideon. I used to work with Miles before he cut me out. That box, it's the key to everything he's been hiding, and if you don't listen to me, neither of us walks out of here alive." Her stomach lurched. Work with Miles? Her husband, the grease-stained mechanic who fixed carburetors and drank cheap beer at Brewer's Diner? The idea clashed with everything she knew or thought she knew. Before she could press him, a beam of light sliced through the mill's broken windows, sweeping the shadows. Miles's voice cut through the night, sharp and urgent. "Lena, I know you're in there. Come out, let's talk." Gideon grabbed her arm, pulling her deeper into the mill, behind a rusted conveyor belt. "He's not here to talk," he hissed. "He's here to clean up his mess. You're the mess." She yanked free, her pulse hammering. "What's in this box? Tell me now, or I'm walking out there myself." He hesitated, then nodded, his voice dropping lower. "It's a drive encrypted, small enough to fit in your palm. Proof of a deal Miles brokered. 2 years ago, he stumbled into something big, laundering cash for a crew out of the city. Millions, Lena. He's been playing the small-town nobody while funneling dirty money through that shop of his. The drive's got names, dates, accounts, enough to bury him and the woman he's with. The woman. That sleek, cold figure in the coat. Not a lover. Then or not just a lover. A partner. Lena's mind reeled, the Polaroid flashing back. Miles laughing, shirtless, that silver braceleted arm. A setup? A lie? She shook the box, hearing the faint rattle again, and Gideon's eyes darkened. "They think you've seen it," he said. "That's why they're here. I sent the photo to spook you, get you digging. Didn't expect you'd find the drive this fast." Footsteps echoed closer, boots grinding glass into the concrete. A second voice joined Miles's, the woman's, clipped and commanding. "She's got it with her. End this, Miles. Now." Lena's breath hitched. "End this. Her." She looked at Gideon, his face tense, calculating. "Why help me? What's in it for you?" He smirked, bitter. "Revenge. Miles double-crossed me, took my cut, left me for dead. I've been tracking him ever since. That drives my ticket to burn him down." A shadow loomed in the doorway. Miles, flashlight in hand, his broad frame filling the gap. "Lena, I'm not kidding. Come out. You don't understand what you're holding." She pressed herself against the conveyor, the box digging into her chest. Gideon nodded toward a side exit, a jagged hole in the mill's wall where boards had rotted away. "Go," he whispered. "I'll stall them." "Why should I believe you're not just as bad?" she shot back, her voice trembling. "You shouldn't," he said simply, "but I'm your only shot right now." Miles's flashlight swept closer, the beam grazing the edge of their hiding spot. Lena's heart pounded. She had seconds. She bolted for the exit, ducking through the gap, splinters snagging her jacket. The night swallowed her again, the forest dense and disorienting. Behind her, a shout Miles' voice, then Gideon's, sharp and defiant. "Looking for me, old friend?" A scuffle erupted, grunts and the thud of fists, but Lena didn't look back. She ran, the box banging against her ribs, branches clawing at her face. The sedan was still where she'd left it, keys in the ignition. She slid inside, hands shaking as she started the engine. The headlights flared, illuminating the mill and the woman, standing alone in the road, her coat billowing in the wind. She didn't move, just stared, her face unreadable. Lena floored it, the sedan lurching forward, tires spinning. The woman stepped aside at the last second, calm as death, and Lena sped past, the mill shrinking in the mirror. Her phone buzzed another text. "Head north. Ditch the car at the river. I'll find you." Gideon? Someone else? She didn't know. The road stretched ahead, dark and twisting, the drive in the box a ticking bomb. Miles wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal, and she was caught in his web. But as the river loomed closer, glinting under the moon, a new sound cut through the night. Sirens, faint but growing louder. She glanced at the box on the passenger seat. Open it? Destroy it? Hand it over? Each choice felt like a trap. The sirens wailed nearer, red and blue lights flickering through the trees. Friend or foe? She couldn't tell. The riverbank appeared, steep and muddy. She slammed the brakes, grabbed the box, and stumbled out, the sedan's engine still ticking. Headlights crested the hill behind her too fast. She was out of time. Did you mean give me the last one, as in the previous segment, segment 4, or did you intend to ask for the next one, segment 5? Since you've been requesting next so far, I'll assume you want segment 5 to continue the story. If I got that wrong, just let me know, and I'll adjust. The river roared below, its black waters churning under the moon's pale glow, a relentless force carving through the mountains around Hollow Creek. Lena stood on the muddy bank, the metal box gripped tight in her hands, its edges slick with her sweat. The sirens screamed closer, their wail slicing through the night, red and blue lights painting the trees in frantic streaks. Behind her, the sedan's headlights still burned, a beacon she couldn't outrun. She had seconds maybe, Lesto decide. The text burned in her mind. Head north. Ditch the car at the river. I'll find you. Gideon's words, she hoped, but trust was a luxury she didn't have. The box rattled faintly as she shifted it. The encrypted drive inside a Pandora's curse millions in dirty money, Miles's secrets, a life she'd never signed up for. Open it, and she might unravel everything. Destroy it, and she could lose her only leverage. Hand it over to who? The cops? The woman in the coat? Every option felt like a noose tightening. Tires screeched on the road above, gravel spraying as vehicles skidded to a stop. Voices barked sharp, authoritative. Hands up! Step away from the car! Flashlights swept the bank, beams darting like hounds on a scent. Lena's pulse thundered. Police? Or someone worse? Wearing the badge as a mask? She crouched low, the river's mist cloaking her, and edged toward the water. The sedan was a liability, she had to ditch it, like the text said. But the box, she couldn't let it go. Not yet. She unzipped her jacket, shoved it inside, and cinched the fabric tight. The cold bit at her skin as she waded in, the current tugging at her boots, icy and unforgiving. Lena! Miles's voice cut through the chaos, raw and desperate, closer than she'd expected. She froze, half submerged, and glanced back. He stood at the bank's edge, silhouetted against the flashing lights, his face a mask of panic. Two figures flanked him, uniforms, guns drawn, but he wasn't cuffed. Not yet. Don't do this. You don't know what you're messing with. Her chest tightened. Was he warning her or threatening her? The woman from the mill stepped into view beside him, her coat stark against the night, her expression unreadable. She murmured something to one of the officers, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Too familiar. Too calm. Lena's gut twisted whatever this was. The law wasn't on her side. The water surged past her knees, pulling harder. She had to move. North, the text said. She stumbled forward, the riverbed slick underfoot, the box a lead weight against her ribs. Shouts erupted behind her orders, arguments, but she didn't look back. The current swallowed her waist, then her chest, and she gasped as it dragged her under. For a moment, there was only darkness and cold, the river's roar deafening. She kicked, broke the surface, and swam, her arms burning, the bank a blur of shadows and lights. The sirens faded, dulled by the water's thunder, and she hauled herself onto the far shore, mud caking her hands. She collapsed, coughing, the box still secure. Footsteps squelched nearby, soft, deliberate. She tensed, scrambling to her knees, and saw him, Gideon, soaked and grim, a gash bleeding above his eye. He'd made it out of the mill, somehow. "You're a hell of a runner," he rasped, offering a hand. She didn't take it, standing on her own, her breath fogging between them. "You said you'd find me," she said, voice shaking. "Now what?" He nodded at the box. "We open it. Together. There's a cabin half a mile up mine. Safe. Off-grid. We've got a head start, but not much." "And if I say no?" she challenged, stepping back. "If I burn this thing and walk away?" "You won't," he said, his eyes steady, "because you want answers, and you want him to pay." She hated that he was right. The betrayal, the lies, it wasn't just about survival now. It was personal. Headlights flickered through the trees across the river, engines revving. They were coming. "Fine," she said, clutching the box tighter. "But if you're lying, Gideon, I'll bury you with him." He smirked, faint and fleeting. "Fair enough." They ran, the forest swallowing them, the river's roar fading behind. The cabin loomed ahead, a squat, weathered shack, its windows dark. Inside, Gideon lit a kerosene lamp, its glow casting jagged shadows. He produced a small toolkit, nodding at the box. Moment of truth. Lena set it on the table, her hands steady despite the tremor in her chest. He pried it open, the lock snapping with a dull click. Inside, nestled in foam, was a tiny USB drive black, unassuming, lethal. Gideon plugged it into a battered laptop, his fingers flying over the keys. The screen flared to life, files spilling open, spreadsheets, bank records, coded messages. Millions in transactions, names she didn't recognize and one she did. Cora Hensley. "The baker?" Lena whispered, stunned. "She's in on this?" "Silent partner," Gideon muttered. "Miles used her shop to move cash. She's smarter than she looks." A new file popped up, a video. Grainy footage of Miles, laughing, shirtless, in that motel room. The woman with the silver bracelet leaned into frame. Cora, her auburn curls unmistakable. Not an affair. A meeting. A performance. "They staged it," Lena breathed, rage boiling up. "To keep me distracted." Gideon nodded. "And it worked. Until now." The laptop beeped, a red alert flashing. Remote access detected. Someone was hacking in. Gideon cursed, yanking the drive free. "They've tracked us. We've got minutes." Outside, engines growled, lights piercing the trees. The woman's voice carried on the wind, cold and clear. "No more running, Lena." The cabin door rattled, and the lamp flickered out,